kind of strange that so maybe we should develop a fund to get a teleprompter so I can get on his level. And I'll donate the first check for that. Another thing is different today with all this you nice folks here. I don't see any Secret Service here, which is great. There's a freedom here. You actually do what you want to do. You say what you want to say. There's no CNBC, ABC here, CNN and BBC here either. There's just people who want to express their opinions. Let me tell you a couple of things about myself. I grew up and spent many years in the Soviet Union. I consider those wasted years, 30 years of my life. And I do remember many times my mom was telling me, you need to get the hell out of here. This is the country without future. And like Ronald Reagan said, that's an evil country. She was saying that before Ronald Reagan. My only source of information for you to know, there was no conservative newspaper. There was only 2 government-run TV stations, and there were newspapers that were called Pravda. I called it Lies, which was supposed to be truth in English, but I called it Lies. There was another one that was called Izvestia, which means news. I called it lack of news. There's hardly anything. It's all about the Communist Party. So my information and my education came from a little shortwave Grundig radio, and I was listening to Voice of America. And that was 2 big events in my life every week to get that radio station going and be quiet, basically under the covers, and that's how my mind was formed. I was planning to get the hell out of the Soviet Union. I wanted, like I was introduced, I wanted to go to medical school, but my parents found out that they had to spend all their life savings to bribe somebody in the admission commission in medical school for me to get there. So I definitely could not, my family could not afford that. But I have to explain that education, even the higher education, in the Soviet Union was free of charge, or supposedly free of charge. And how do you think they managed that? How the government managed that? Very simply, they just taxed everybody's salary so high, so people were making hardly any money. Like my parents were bringing home, my father was bringing home $40 a month, my mom being a lawyer bringing $35 a month, and the buying power of those little dollars was very minuscule. So despite the fact that it was a free education, it was not free at all. The whole country was paying for it. And I wonder if you know they had already universal health care. So if you are getting sick, you go into the hospital and you don't have to pay anything. But when you don't have to pay anything, you're getting nothing. Being in the army, I was seriously injured and I had to be operated. It was a long surgery. So the best painkiller after the surgery they came up with, that was aspirin. So the nurse was giving me a pill of aspirin while I basically already screaming from pain. So my father came to nurse me because in the government hospital, government-run hospital, there was only 1 nurse per floor for 58 rooms. And I'm telling you, it was stinky, there's no air, there's no medications. So I told Papa, I really need something to deal with my pain. Pain is excruciating. So he was quite, creative. He went to the grocery store and he bought Stolichnaya, and he smuggled a few bottles of Stolichnaya in the hospital, put it underneath the bed. So when all bureaucrats were leaving around 4 o'clock, all doctors and most of the nurses, I was reaching underneath, getting my vodka, gulping maybe 8 to 10 ounces straight, and I have to tell you, it's a disgusting warm drink. It's not a martini at all, but it knocked me down, and that's how I stayed pain-free and probably killed my liver during the months of drinking vodka. So that's the universal health care. While the bureaucrats, party bureaucrats at the same time created a separate system, very sophisticated medical care only for themselves. Some sort of like Mr. Obama is getting, his personal physician, available 24 hours a day. So they had similar services. And at each clinic or each hospital, there was a police officer assigned there, not to allow simple citizens to be accepted in that hospital because it was a government hospital only for the government employees. But the rest of the country was getting the free healthcare. I left Soviet Union. That was the greatest event of my life. Ended up here in Atascadero from all the places, and live here with my wife. She is right there, Laura. She is adorable, and she is a big patriot of this country, despite the fact that she was born in Chicago. She was a good seed in Chicago, and she ended up here. She likes vegetables, but not as much as Michelle Obama does, you know? So I think she's more into hot dogs, what she would buy right now. So I live like right in the western side of the Atascadero with a few dogs. There are somewhat disabled dogs and a few cats, and gang of chickens. And I'm thinking, I'm comparing my life with the life of our president. He does have a garden. He is protected by Secret Service. Who is protecting me? Because I'm so far away from the rest of it, from the downtown. So if something happens, it happens in my house, it's only going to be two of my friends, Smith and Wesson. They're going to protect me. By the time police will get to my place, I will be dead. There's nothing will be left. My wife will be probably raped, and I will be just killed. That's how it happens. It takes several minutes. I have another friend. His name is Jim Bean. We meet with him tonight, every night, quite often, and he actually helps me a lot to deal with frustration I'm developing with the politics that's happening in this country. But actually my goal was here to tell you a real story and explain how tyranny develops. Because when the Soviet Union started, nobody thought about it as a tyranny. Everybody was thinking, wow, what a great deal is being proposed by Comrade Lenin. And what he proposed is to take the land from the landowners and to take the fabrics of factories from the factory owners. And he said, we're gonna give you the land, and the peasants will be working the land, and it will be your land. And to the factory workers, he said, and we're gonna give you factories. You will be the owners of the factories. And everybody said, wow, what a deal, great deal, we support Bolsheviks. They were called Bolsheviks, then they called themselves socialists, and then they became communists. So that was the first step. And what he did also, one of his first very direct laws was to surrender the guns, because Russians were very heavily armed for many, many years, for hunting, for self-defense, and he expected some resistance from the population. So he issued an executive order to surrender all the guns. And the punishment for not following his executive order was actually a death penalty right in your courtyard or backyard. So if somebody, if your neighbors is telling Chekhov, that was a former KGB, it was a Chekhov. If somebody would be sending them information that you have guns and you decline to surrender them, you probably would be executed, and a lot of people did. Why did he do it? Because he expected huge resistance against his reforms from the landowners and from the factory owners. So he tried to eliminate that resistance, and people still managed to keep the guns. Then, after Vladimir Lenin passed away, and the state of the economy was horrific. I mean, it came better for a little bit, but then Comrade Stalin came to power, and he was looking for really incredible, fast-acting reforms in the Soviet Union. And he issued a second executive order, and the second executive order was to surrender all the revolutionary guns from the people who were participating in the revolution and fighting on the side of the socialists. He said, you need to surrender all your revolvers, all your rifles, or you're gonna get 10 to 25 years of re-education labor camp in Siberia. You probably heard the word Gulag, Главное управление лагерей. That means the central administration for the concentration camps. And when somebody is sent to Gulag for 10 years, nobody actually survived 10 years. Hard labor in Siberia, year in and year out, it's a death penalty. And hardly ever anybody survived 25 years. So millions of people are actually getting arrested. So my story was told by my 91 years old father who lives in Monterey right now. He was 29. There was an evening on 29 in their government flat. The flat was 200 square feet for 6 people. The government decided that was good enough for 6 people, 200 feet. Grandfather is sitting at the table and look at his revolutionary guns. Actually, that was his awards from his commander or general for his involvement in the revolution. So he has certain attachment to them, but he has a dilemma to be sent to the concentration camp or destroy them. And he is wrapping them up, and then he is telling his father, said, Grandpa, I'm gonna dump him in the outhouse, in the toilet. And Grandpa, his name was Wolf, I never met him either, and he said, Ben, what are you doing? You're gonna dump your guns, and your guns, and it was 29, and then they will come and arrest you. And my grandfather said to his grandfather, don't be silly, I was fighting for this revolution. It's not gonna happen, I was fighting for Comrade Stalin. And he dumped the guns in the toilet, so they were gone. And here we go, 1934, 5 years later, 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a loud banging on the door. So his wife is opening the door. There are 2 NKVD officers in 2 long leather coats telling my grandfather to get his little things, and then he was taken away like millions of others who did not have a chance to protect himself in this situation. He didn't have a gun, he didn't have a rifle. Those 2 guys, police officers or political police officers, did have a sidearms or side weapons. He didn't. They took him away, they sent him to Siberia for 2 years, then they resent him back to Minsk, where he was tried in the KGB court for 10 minutes without public defender. He was found guilty on the charge of digging the tunnel under the Kremlin War with the purpose to kill Comrade Stalin.